When we think of Hollywood stars, we imagine glamour, fame, and the silver screen. But during World War II, many of these celebrities traded movie sets for battlefields, risking their lives in one of the most dangerous times in history. From beloved actors to rising stars, these men didn't just act like heroes on screen, they became real-life heroes in uniform. In this video, we'll uncover 22 Hollywood stars who actually served in World War II, and you'll be surprised at just how many of your favorite actors were also brave soldiers. James Stewart. Before James Stewart became a legendary Hollywood actor, he had already developed a love for flying. In fact, Stewart earned his private pilot's license long before World War II began. When the U.S. entered the war, Stewart didn't stay behind in the comfort of movie sets, he enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Forces in 1941. At first, officials hesitated to send him into combat because of his fame, but Stewart insisted on real duty. He quickly rose through the ranks and eventually became a squadron commander, leading dangerous bombing missions over Nazi-occupied Europe. Stewart flew more than 20 combat missions and beat 24 bombers, putting his life on the line like any other soldier. By the war's end, he had earned numerous decorations, including the Distinguished Flying Cross. Unlike many celebrities, Stewart never bragged about his service, but his quiet courage made him one of Hollywood's true heroes. Gable. Clark Gable, known as the King of Hollywood, was at the height of his fame when tragedy struck. In 1942, his beloved wife, actress Carole Lombard, was killed in a plane crash while returning from a war bond tour. Heartbroken, Gable decided to honor her memory by joining the U.S. Army Air Forces. Despite being in his early 40s and well past the age of most recruits, he insisted on active duty rather than a safe publicity role. Gable trained as an aerial gunner and flew dangerous combat missions over Europe, often manning the guns during bombing raids. He also filmed footage for military documentaries to boost morale. His fame was so great that Adolf Hitler reportedly ordered his capture if found alive. Gable survived the war and returned to Hollywood, but the experience left a deep mark on him, forever shaping both his life and career. Henry Fonda. Henry Fonda was already a rising star in Hollywood when the United States entered World War II, but fame didn't stop him from serving his country. In 1942, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy, determined to contribute directly rather than remain in the safety of movie studios. Fonda rejected the idea of taking on propaganda or publicity work and requested to serve in active combat duty. He was assigned as a quartermaster on a destroyer in the Pacific Theater, where naval battles were some of the most dangerous and unpredictable of the entire war. Life aboard a warship meant constant risk from Japanese aircraft and submarines, and Fonda performed his duties with quiet professionalism. His time in the Navy left a lasting impression on him, instilling a calm resilience that later appeared in his film roles. For Fonda, service was not about glory, it was simply about responsibility. Charlton Heston. Before Charlton Heston became famous for epic roles in Ben-Hur and the Ten Commandments, he served his country in World War II. Heston enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Forces in 1944 and worked as a radio operator and aerial gunner on B-25 bombers stationed in the Aleutian Islands of Alaska. Although not as well known as the battles in Europe or the Pacific, the Aleutian campaign was harsh, with freezing conditions and constant threats from Japanese forces. Heston later said the experience shaped his discipline and work ethic, qualities that followed him into his acting career. Unlike many Hollywood stars who stayed behind, he faced real combat duty in a remote and dangerous area. His quiet contributions during the war went largely unnoticed at the time, but they helped establish the strong, heroic image that later defined his career on the silver screen. Kirk Douglas. Kirk Douglas, one of Hollywood's most iconic tough guys, was just starting out as an actor when World War II broke out. He enlisted in the U.S. Navy in 1941 and served as a communications officer aboard a submarine chaser in the Atlantic Ocean. His job was to track and intercept German U-boats, which were a constant threat to Allied shipping. While Douglas never saw major combat action, his work was vital in protecting convoys and maintaining supply lines. The discipline and resilience he developed during his Navy service later influenced his commanding presence on screen. After the war, Douglas returned to acting and soon rose to fame with powerful performances in films like Champion and Spartacus. Though he rarely spoke in detail about his time in the Navy, Douglas embodied the determination of a generation that put duty before personal ambition. Paul Newman. Paul Newman is remembered as one of the most charismatic actors of Hollywood's golden age, but long before his career took off, he served in World War II. Newman originally dreamed of becoming a Navy pilot, but because of his color blindness, he was disqualified from flight school. Determined to serve, he instead trained as a radioman and gunner and was assigned to torpedo bombers in the Pacific Theater. In 1945, he narrowly avoided death when his unit was reassigned at the last moment. The men who replaced them were killed in combat during the Battle of Okinawa. This close brush with fate stayed with him for life. Newman's wartime experience shaped his humility and compassion, qualities he carried into both his acting and his later humanitarian work. His time in uniform reminded him that life was fragile, and every opportunity should be used to make a difference. Tony Curtis. Before becoming a Hollywood heartthrob, Tony Curtis served his country during World War II. Born Bernard Schwartz to Hungarian immigrant parents, Curtis grew up in poverty before enlisting in the U.S. Navy at just 17 years old. He served aboard a submarine tender in the Pacific, where his duties included delivering supplies and supporting combat vessels. Curtis later recalled the harsh realities of military life, including long stretches at sea and the constant threat of enemy attacks. While he didn't see frontline combat, his service gave him a sense of discipline and resilience that later carried into his acting career. Curtis often credited his time in the Navy with broadening his worldview, exposing him to people and cultures far from his New York upbringing. When he returned home after the war, he pursued his dream of acting, eventually becoming one of Hollywood's brightest stars in the 1950s. Alec Guinness. Best known for playing Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars and for his classic roles in British cinema, Alec Guinness also had a distinguished record during World War II. Guinness joined the Royal Navy Volunteer Reserve in 1941 and was trained as a landing craft officer. He took part in several dangerous missions, including the invasion of Sicily in 1943 and the D-Day landings in Normandy in 1944. Guinness commanded landing craft that carried troops to hostile beaches under heavy enemy fire, a responsibility that required immense courage and precision. Though he survived the war, the experiences left a deep impact on him, particularly his respect for the ordinary soldiers who fought alongside him. After the war, Guinness resumed his acting career, but his performances often carried a quiet gravity rooted in his real-life wartime service. His bravery off-screen made him a true hero beyond Hollywood. Marlon Brando. Before becoming one of Hollywood's most influential actors, Marlon Brando attempted to serve in World War II. Brando tried to enlist in the U.S. Army after graduating high school, but he was rejected due to a knee injury he had sustained earlier in life. Determined to contribute, Brando worked briefly with the civilian public service, assisting in roles that supported the war effort at home. Though he never saw combat, his desire to serve reflected the patriotic spirit of his generation. During this time, Brando developed a deeper interest in acting, eventually training at the Actors Studio after the war ended. While his military path was cut short, the discipline and frustration he experienced influenced his intensity as an actor. Brando's post-war career redefined Hollywood, but behind his fame was a young man who had been ready to serve when his country needed him. Audrey Hepburn. Though not a soldier, Audrey Hepburn's World War II experience was harrowing and shaped the woman she became. As a teenager in the Netherlands, Hepburn lived under Nazi occupation. She endured years of starvation, witnessed the deportation of Jewish families, and secretly worked with the Dutch resistance. Hepburn carried messages for resistance fighters and even helped raise money for the cause by performing in secret ballet recitals. Malnutrition left her with lasting health problems, but her bravery during the war years forged her resilience and empathy. After the war, Hepburn pursued a career in acting and quickly rose to international fame with films like Roman Holiday and Breakfast at Tiffany's. Yet, she never forgot the suffering she witnessed. Later in life, she dedicated herself to humanitarian work with UNICEF, driven by her wartime experiences. Her courage during World War II made her a heroine long before she became a star. David Niven. David Niven, the suave British actor best known for roles in Around the World in 80 Days and The Pink Panther, had one of the most remarkable wartime careers among Hollywood stars. When war was declared in 1939, Niven immediately left his rising career in Hollywood and returned to Britain to serve. He joined the British Army and was commissioned as an officer in the Rifle Brigade. Niven took part in several dangerous operations, including the Normandy landings in 1944. Despite his fame, he refused to take any special treatment and fought alongside ordinary soldiers. After the war, Niven rarely spoke about his military service, insisting that the real heroes were the men who never came home. His quiet humility, combined with his bravery, earned him deep respect. When he returned to acting, audiences saw not just charm but the strength of a man who had truly lived history.